Hello everyone, Jay Whitner here with Space Headlines. We do a quick overview of what goes on in space each week. Today we're going to be talking about the third week of April 2018. Our first item has to do with SpaceX. Elon Musk tweeted that they are going to make an attempt to recover a second stage of the Falcon 9. This is pretty exciting. It's the next step in reusability. They're already reusing the first stage, and they're working toward fairing reuse. So the second stage is really very exciting. It would sort of close the loop on the whole thing. What they want to do is use a balloon. This is sort of a hybrid balloon parachute, and then cushion the landing with an inflatable surface. So we'll see if SpaceX is able to demonstrate recovery of the second stage. It'll be very exciting. The next item has to do with Stratolaunch. The biggest plane in the history of the world may take flight this summer. You see a depiction here. At first glance, it may look like it's two airplanes, but it really is two airplanes duct taped together. So this is a Paul Allen project. It harkens back to the days of the X-15 of air launch. So the aircraft you see depicted here would carry a rocket, which would be launched in midair, and there's numerous advantages to that. So they expect to have their first flight this summer. Later on, they'll be launching rockets off of this vehicle. The first one will probably be a Pegasus rocket, and eventually they'll do larger rockets. And there's also where they may be able to carry more than one Pegasus at a time, so to do a couple of launches per flight of the main aircraft. SpaceX is talking about their BFR, this giant rocket, which he talked about most recently in Australia, is going to be built in Los Angeles. So the location is the Port of Los Angeles. They have an 18-acre site there. And as much as I would have liked to have seen them building the rocket in Florida, it does make a certain amount of sense. The location is about 20 miles from the SpaceX headquarters, which has obvious advantages for them. So best of luck on getting the BFR going. Orbital ATK made an announcement at the Space Symposium that they have a name now for their what they used to call the next generation launch. They're calling this Omega. The schedule for this vehicle, which is a high capacity vehicle designed more to take satellites up to geosynchronous than low Earth orbit applications, they want to do ground testing in 2019. They're hoping for the first launch in 2021, to be fully operational by 2022, and to have a heavy version of it by 2024. One interesting aspect here is all-American engines. Many people are concerned about the presence of Russian engines in American rockets, so this would be another step toward independence from that. SpaceX again, they had a launch of the TESS Planet Hunter. This is sort of the follow-on to the Kepler spacecraft that detected so many exoplanets. So the forecast is that TESS is going to locate dramatically more exoplanets than the Kepler spacecraft did. The launch took place from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station here in Florida on a Falcon 9, and we're all excited to see the results of this. But as I understand it, there's roughly a 2-month checkout up in space to make sure everything is operating properly post-launch before they really turn the thing on and start actually doing their main job. So it may be a couple months before we really start getting some results out of TESS. With the new emphasis on lunar return that we've seen from the current administration with their Space Policy Directive number 1, NASA has now come out with a new exploration roadmap that takes guidance from the content of Space Policy Directive 1 and its lunar focus. So it talks about activities through 2030. So it's sort of a mid-range time frame that it covers. And one of the highlights of what's shown in their current graphic is a human-rated lander by the mid-2020s. Looks like 2024, 2025, if they stick to the current timing, we would have a human-rated lander, which would be a giant step toward the lunar return. We had some very good news about Bridenstine. He has now been approved by Congress as the NASA administrator. And some of the interesting tidbits here is he's the 13th administrator of NASA. It's the longest that NASA has ever gone without having an administrator. And it was by far the most contentious vote in the history of NASA administrators, and it was very much a party line vote. Effectively, every Republican voted for, every Democrat voted against. And I was sad to see that, because it really should be people voting their opinions as opposed to party lines. But at any rate, congratulations to Mr. Bridenstine for being approved by Congress. We look forward to him leading us back to the moon and wish him all the best. We spoke earlier in the broadcast about NASA's new lunar focus. And one big piece of that is to build a lunar space station that orbits the moon. And the first step of that would be construction of some of the elements starting next year. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but this is the Lunar Orbiting Platform Gateway. Hopefully they can come up with a more catchy name for this thing. But the first elements would actually be launched to their orbit by about 2022. And this facility should be finished by 2025. And the idea is not permanent habitation on this thing, but it would be crew tended, crew used, as opposed to permanently crewed. And it would accommodate up to 4 astronauts at a time. Blue Origin continues to make progress toward their New Glenn rocket. And one of the keystone pieces of that rocket is the BE-4 methane oxygen engine. This has been under development for many years, and the testing continues to go smoothly. They had some reporting on this at the Space Symposium. And this rocket is the key engine for the New Glenn rocket. And the engine would also be used potentially in ULA's Vulcan rocket, although that has not yet been finally determined. The testing process, as I said, is going well, and it's supposed to be completed by the end of the year. The FCC was displeased with the actions of one satellite company, and they've issued a warning. The FCC is warning firms that there's going to be penalties if you launch a payload that's not been approved. The backstory on this is the Federal Communications Commission was approached for licensing about some small satellites. And they said no because of the size of the satellites. It was a problem with tracking them. So Swarm promptly went off and launched the satellites anyway on another rocket from another nation. They launched the satellites on an Indian rocket. The FCC is understandably displeased with them, and they've issued this warning to everyone that there will be penalties moving forward for this sort of behavior. So while they're not specific on what the penalties are going to be, it seems that this could be a big detriment toward launching without a license. That's it for our coverage for week 3 of April 2018. Hope you enjoyed our show, and please come back and see us in a week or so, and we'll be talking about the 4th week of April. Take care.